The death toll from a new respiratory virus climbs to 56. As more than 300 new cases are declared, China widens a lockdown of the affected areas. The coronavirus has already travelled to over a dozen other countries. Clashes in Lebanon as the country marks 100 days of an anti-government movement. Protesters are angry at the lineup of a new cabinet, which they say was picked on sectarian lines. And Donald Trump's defense team takes to the Senate floor, arguing the impeachment trial is politically motivated and an attempt to derail the 2020 election. Democrats say the US president is a danger to his country. Hello and welcome back. I'm Ellen Gainsford. The spread of a new respiratory virus in China is accelerating. This despite an unprecedented lockdown of the region, where the outbreak is believed to have originated, affecting more than 50 million people. Well, the coronavirus has already travelled to over a dozen other countries. Canada is the latest nation to declare a case, and there have been at least 3 patients diagnosed here in France. Nick Rushworth has the latest.
This Paris chemist has run out of surgical masks. People are coming in to buy them only to be told there are none left. That's worrying for customers. This one has ordered 2.
Some people have the virus. I don't know how it spreads exactly, but it's good to have a mask, just in case.
French health authorities say the illness appears less serious than comparable past outbreaks.
The level of danger is assessed by the relation between the number of deaths and the number of cases. The number of deaths has been increasing, but slower than the number of cases. We have a maximum 3% mortality. But we think there are many more cases than the ones we know of, which means the mortality is lower. It is already lower than the SARS outbreak.
The vast majority of cases are in Wuhan, in China's Hubei province, but there are a small number of infections in around a dozen countries worldwide, including in the United States. The victims are mainly people who traveled from China.
We were expecting that eventually the virus would hit the United States, although we weren't expecting it to hit this quickly. The patient was appropriately treated. The patient had a mask placed and was asked the appropriate screening questions, and we determined that there was a history that the patient had traveled through the Wuhan region of China.
Vigilance is especially high at airports. In Malaysia, international passengers across the country are being screened. Those having a fever or cough or facing difficulties breathing are taken to hospital. The public is being reminded to be hygienic and wear a mask in crowded areas.
Now to Lebanon, where protesters have been marking the 100-day anniversary of an anti-government movement. A demonstration in the capital, Beirut, began peacefully, but the situation deteriorated by the evening. And riot police responded with tear gas and water cannons. Olivia Salazar-Winspear has the latest.
Pulling at barbed wire barricades, despite being pushed back by the army. As police fired water cannons, this man tried to face down the security forces with a child in his arms before they stage an intervention. Earlier on Saturday, the crowds were out in force on this, the 100th day of protests in Lebanon, with banners calling for revolution and expressing no trust in the government, which they see as too sectarian. On Tuesday, the new administration was announced. 20 ministers, some of them technocrats, including members of Hezbollah and those aligned with the pro-Iranian party. A move that was met with anger from these protesters, calling for independent experts in power and an end to the corruption that has plagued previous regimes. Sustained upheaval that has had serious effects on the country's economy, with experts warning that Lebanon is near bankrupt and may soon need to turn to the IMF for a bailout.
The death toll in Turkey has risen to 29 following a 6.8 magnitude earthquake that struck the east of the country late on Friday. Aftershocks from the tremor were felt as far away as Iran and Lebanon. Well, rescue crews are still searching for people trapped under the rubble of collapsed buildings. Valerie de Kimp brings us the latest on the ongoing recovery operations.
A miraculous escape for a toddler and her mother. They were pulled from the rubble more than 24 hours after the earthquake struck. Rescue operations in the Turkish city of El-Aziz continued late into the night as emergency workers scrambled to find survivors. The 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck on Friday evening in the east of the country, bringing down buildings and sending people rushing into the street. Authorities have warned people not to return to damaged buildings. Mosques, schools, and other public buildings have now been opened to welcome survivors.
We were at home tonight, but there was another aftershock, and so we came back here. We're using the facilities provided by the government.
The Turkish government and aid groups have sent tents, blankets, and food, but the affected region is remote and sparsely populated, making it difficult to deploy emergency workers and supplies quickly. Meanwhile, hundreds of people waited anxiously to hear from their relatives.
They were at home. After the earthquake, we were unable to make contact with them. No conversations, no phone calls. For the past 2 hours, their phones have been ringing. They answered once, but weren't able to speak. After that, we got no response, and now their phones aren't ringing anymore.
Earthquakes are common in Turkey. The country's interior minister was actually at a meeting on earthquake preparedness when the quake struck. Greece has offered help, but so far authorities have not received international assistance.
Now to the US, where it was the turn of Donald Trump's defense lawyers to make their case this Saturday, as the US president's impeachment trial rumbles on. Trump stands accused of abuse of power and obstruction of justice, but his defense team argues the case is politically motivated and an attempt to remove him from the ballot in 2020. France 24's Washington correspondent Ketevan Gorgistani brings us the latest.
For day one of their opening arguments, Donald Trump's defense attorneys kept it short, using just about 2 of their loaded 24 hours. Their defense strategy was focused on dismissing the Democrats' arguments on abuse of power. They say that Donald Trump had reason to be concerned about corruption in Ukraine, that he had every right as U.S. president to withhold aid to the country, and that the withholding of that aid could not be seen or used as leverage against the Ukrainians, because they claim that the Ukrainians did not know about the withholding of the aid at the time. But they never actually directly contested the fact that Donald Trump asked a foreign power to investigate a political rival. His defense team did also dismiss the obstruction of Congress charge, claiming that executive privilege gave Donald Trump every right to prevent his administration officials from testifying or releasing documents. Now, Trump's team will likely be going a little bit more on the offense when they return to the Senate trial on Monday, but ultimately the strategy is do no harm. They know that there's little to no chance that Donald Trump will be removed from office at the end of this trial, and so their goal is to play the clock and avoid making any mistake that could give the wavering Republicans an excuse to side with the Democrats.
And finally, Italy is holding regional elections this Sunday, but the stakes are national. Matteo Salvini's far-right League Party has its eye on a northern region, which has been a left-wing stronghold since World War II. The former Interior Minister hopes such a political earthquake could shake up the government and ultimately be the key to his return to power. But his success is by no means certain. The region saw the birth of the anti-populist Sardine movement last November, drawing tens of thousands of people to rally against Salvini. Well, that's all from me for now. Stay with us on France 24.